Hello again. Please select the backseat position and press spacebar to continue. We'll now cover the Pulse Doppler modes. Please select PD Search using the correct WCS mode button. This commands the radar to the basic Pulse Doppler search mode. The DDD will now display azimuth as in Pulse Search. The vertical scale is no longer range though. That scale instead displays closure rate, meaning that in Pulse Doppler search, it is not possible to read out the range of a detected target. This is important to keep in mind, as it is easy to get confused when what seems to be a closer target instead is a target with a greater closure rate, rather than a target closer to own aircraft. In addition, being a Pulse Doppler mode, the radar now has two blind closure rate ranges. The first one is a filter centered around 0 relative closure rate and is 200 nautical miles wide, or plus or minus 100 nautical miles from 0 relative closure rate. This means that a target moving away from own aircraft and within 100 nautical miles of own airspeed will be invisible to the radar. The second one is a filter used to filter out unwanted ground returns and is 266 nautical miles wide, or a closure rate within plus or minus 133 nautical miles from own aircraft ground speed. This means that a target showing within 133 nautical miles closure rate of the ground return closure rate will also be invisible. This is the filter that can be used to notch the radar. To counter a notch, the AWG-9 has a built-in function that disables the second filter, the MLC filter, when the radar is elevated above 3 degrees from the horizon, as the ground will not be visible anyway. This means as long as you're looking up at a target, it will not be possible to notch the AWG-9. The filter can also be manually disabled using the MLC switch on the DDD by setting it to out. Just keep in mind that if you have enough radar ground returns at the same azimuth as the target, the radar will now likely lose the target anyway, and you also run the risk of overloading the more advanced Pulse Doppler modes we will soon move on to. As the two Pulse Doppler filters filter out much of unwanted radar returns, the Pulse Doppler search mode is the mode that has the greatest range and the greatest target detection percentage, as long as the targets are clear of the two filters. Out in front of you, you now have 6 targets moving towards you and away from you. As we're stationary on the ground, both filters will now overlap, but feel free to try disabling the MLC filter. Please go ahead and try to find as many of the targets as you can on the DDD. When ready, press spacebar to continue. We now move on to the Range While Scan, or RWS mode. Please select it using the correct WCS mode button. In this mode, we allow the WCS computer to use FM ranging to range to detected targets in addition to azimuth and closure rate. This information is automatically displayed on the TID as momentary contacts. As these contacts are not true tracks, they are not hookable, and you cannot read out additional information apart from a rough altitude estimation. The estimated altitude is shown on the left side of the target symbols and is rounded to the closest 10,000 feet. You should now see multiple targets on the TID if within selected TID range. If you can't see all targets that are present on the DDD on the TID, try changing the set TID range. The DDD displays the same information as in Pulse Doppler search. Press spacebar when ready to move on to track while search. Track While Search, or TWS, additionally commands the WCS computer to establish and update track files for up to 24 targets detected by the AWG-9. 18 of those can be displayed on the TID, the closest track being prioritized. Please select TWS Manual using the WCS mode buttons. TWS Manual differs from TWS Auto in that the RIO is allowed limited control of the radar scan zone size and location. Because of the requirements for TWS track calculation, the allowable scan zone sizes are plus or minus 20 degrees and 4 bars, or plus and minus 40 degrees and 2 bars. If the azimuth scan zone is set to 40 degrees, the WCS selects plus or minus 40 degrees and 2 bars. All other selections result in the plus or minus 20 degrees and 4 bar scan zone. In TWS Auto, this is set by the WCS to allow tracking of the maximum amount of detected targets. In addition to the symbology present in RWS, we will now see a velocity vector from each target track representing that target's velocity. These symbols can be hooked by setting the HCU to TID cursor, and when hooked will display additional track information on the TID data readouts. With Master Arm on, air-to-air mode and Phoenix is selected, the TWS will additionally show a prioritization of the targets for engagements, as well as range indications to them. This is detailed further in the AIM-54 tutorials. The DDD displays the same information as in Pulse Doppler search, and as with RWS, the TWS modes retain the same vulnerabilities and advantages as the Pulse Doppler search mode. Feel free to try the different TWS settings, and as in RWS, make sure that you detect and track targets on the TID as well as on the DDD. When ready to move on to the Pulse Doppler STT mode, press spacebar. Pulse Doppler STT, or PD-STT, is very similar to Pulse STT, but retains the same pros and cons as the other Pulse Doppler modes. As with Pulse STT, transition to Pulse Doppler STT is accomplished using the HCU in radar mode. The main difference being that as the DDD displays azimuth versus closure rate, the acquisition gates are now rate gates instead. To acquire a target, command half action for super search, which works the same way as in Pulse Search, and position on top of a target return and command full action. If successfully acquired, the same indicator lights above the DDD will illuminate. The radar on target will, however, blink as the radar is in a Pulse Doppler mode. As in Pulse STT, the TID will now show the track following the tracked target. To transition back to Pulse Doppler Search, command half action or desired WCS mode on the corresponding button. Note that a PD-STT track will always return to Pulse Doppler search when dropped, regardless if entered from RWS, TWS, or Pulse Doppler search. Press spacebar when ready to continue. In addition to manual acquisition of a track from a search mode, it is possible to have the WCS automatically attempt acquisition of a target from one of the TWS modes. To command this, hook the desired track on the TID and select either STT mode directly using the WCS mode buttons. This method of transition into STT is only as good as the quality of the TWS track file of the target, and is thus not as sure a method of transition as a manual one using the HCU in RDR. We're now done with this part of the tutorial. When done, feel free to exit the mission.